Again, welcome everyone to today's Links event. I will hand it over to our moderator, Marcella Movit.
Thanks, Long. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you today to talk about literacy instruction, the heart of adult literacy. Today is October 11th, 2023, and we couldn't be more excited about this topic. Before we do jump into it, I wanted to share with you a little bit about this webinar that is part of our larger Universal Technical Assistance webinar series. It's we call it our Wednesday webinar series because we like to hold them the last Wednesday of most months, a little bit of shifting around sometimes like today. And so we really appreciate your flexibility and being able to join us, making this a priority for you. In this monthly series, we cover topics that matter most in the field. So we hope that you'll find that this is really an important topic. And we hope that you'll also find that this and the other webinars in this series help to build the capacity within your state related to this topic. In case there are others in your office that would like to watch this, just couldn't make it today, please don't worry. We record all of our webinars and they will be available on our Links YouTube channel, so those can be accessed very easily. Before we jump in and before I hand you over to our incredible presenters, I wanted to share with you some of our resources that we have available through Links on this specific topic. And there are a lot because we're covering all sorts of literacy today. So I wanted to first mention just a few of our Links state resources or federal initiatives that you can access by using the QR code that you see on the right-hand side of the page towards the top. Some of our related initiatives there are the Digital Resilience in the American Workforce, or DRAW, the Student Achievement in Reading, or STAR, and Teaching Skills That Matter in Adult Education, or TSTM. Within the Links resource collection, some things that I wanted to highlight include the Compendium of Innovative Practices, Holistic Approach to Adult Education Services, and Designing and Delivering Career Pathways at Community Colleges. The QR code to access that is also on the right-hand side of the page, a little bit more towards the bottom. Using that QR code, you'll be able to easily access the resource collection. Additional resources that we have are within the Links online courses. We have Integrating Digital Literacy into Adult English Language Instruction, Integrating Technology in the Adult Education Classroom, a couple of courses related to teaching adults to read, and a course called Teaching Energy Literacy to Adult Learners. You can access those courses through the Learning Portal, and the QR code to do that can be seen on the right-hand side of the page towards the top. Last but not least, we hope that you'll join us to continue these discussions on these important topics by going to the Links community and visiting groups on integrating technology, reading and writing, science, and learning. And if you're not yet part of our Links community, you can join by going to the QR code that you'll see on the right-hand side of the page, or of the screen rather, towards the bottom. All right, so with that, I want to introduce you to our presenters today. So first, we have Carmen Stewart, who is the Vice President of Programming at Seeds of Literacy, a nonprofit organization that provides one-to-one tutoring to adult learners in Cleveland, Ohio. Carmen is the moderator of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Community for Links as well. So you might recognize her through that. Becki.Lemke has been the Assistant Director of Education Coordinator at Cornerstone Career Learning in Huron, South Dakota since 1999. She's developed and presented numerous training programs as a member of South Dakota's professional development team. In addition, Becki was a member of the STAR National Project Team from 2007 until August 2023. With us today, we also have Carol Clymer, who is the co-director of the Goodling Institute for Research in Family Literacy and the Institute for the Study of Adult Literacy at Penn State, with over 45 years of experience implementing and evaluating programs to improve the educational payment of individuals and families with unmet literacy needs. Carol has participated in the design and implementation of professional development projects and large-scale evaluations and outcome studies related to adult education, family literacy, performance benchmarking, employment retention, sectoral employment, out-of-school youth, and college access. And last, but certainly not least, we have Eric Enesheim. He is the managing director of North Star Digital Strategies, which is part of Literacy Minnesota. He is the current president of the National Coalition for Literacy and co-chair of EBAES Task Force through the Open Door Collective. He holds a Master's of International Management degree from the University of St. Thomas. As I said at the beginning, fantastic speakers. I'm so excited to have you hear from them. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Carmen to get us started.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm very excited to be here to talk about literacy instruction, the heart of adult literacy. Really, our work is so important in the field, and I just love to have opportunities to talk about why what we do is so critical to the learners that we serve and so critical to our country as well. So I'm going to actually ask you to participate a little bit as we go through this beginning part of this presentation. So this slide that's on the screen now is entitled Adult Learner Roles. And the question on the screen is, what are some of the roles that your adult learners have? And I'd like to do this as a chat waterfall. So I'm going to ask you to answer that question in the chat, but I want you to hold on to your response until I say send, and then we'll all send them at the same time. And the reason I do that is because some people need a moment to think about answering that question. Some people might type a little bit more slowly. So just to keep the pressure of everyone feeling like they have to respond to chat right away, I'll ask you to ask the question. I'll give you a moment to type in your responses, and then we'll all hit send at the same time, okay? So what are some of the roles that your adult learners fill? All right, and if you can go ahead and hit send. All right, wonderful. So parents, workers, voters, employees, employers, citizens, adults with responsibilities, community organizer, parents, advocates, employees, child, absolutely, a member of the community. Wonderful, and thank you all for participating in that. It's always nice to have folks who are willing to participate. So yes, our students serve a lot of different roles in their lives. And because of that, we have to attend to each of those roles. So this next slide is entitled Adult Learners and Multiple Literacies. And on the screen, you see a screenshot of a woman who looks like she's got those a bunch of colorful little round balls all over her in the air. And she looks like she's just really overwhelmed, almost like a extreme juggling act gone wrong. And the reason that I chose that image is because this is sometimes how our students feel, juggling all of these very different roles, especially if they're students who are struggling with literacy, because then they may not be able to access all of the information that they need to fill all of those roles. So the variety of roles that our learners fill requires them to have several different types of literacy. So if they're parenting, or if they're parenting grandparents who are parenting, or aunts who have custody of their nieces and nephews, then they need general literacy to be able to nurture the early and emerging literacy in the children that are entrusted to their care. They're consumers, so then they need our literacy to impact financial literacy. Financial literacy is having the ability to be smart about money, to be able to look at your bills and tell if you're being overcharged, to look at a credit card offer and to know how much you're going to be paying, to be able to understand how interest even works with credit cards. So financial literacy is also really important if our students are going to be in the role of consumer, and whether that's consuming things in stores or consuming products online, that requires a certain amount of literacy skills. Our students are living in a post-pandemic world, and we all saw during COVID how much we relied on digital everything. And we really saw how great the digital divide really is between our students and the way that our society is working. More and more things require students to have those digital literacy skills and to have digital literacy tools as well. I went to a doctor's appointment recently and went to check in, and they had a QR code on the window. You couldn't, open the window and see a receptionist. They wanted you to scan the QR code to let them know that you were here so you could go in for your appointment. And I thought about my wonderful father, who I was sure would die with a flip phone in his hand. How do you navigate that without digital literacy skills? And our post-pandemic world requires it. Most of us probably make all of our appointments online using MyChart or something similar to that. We might leave messages with our doctor. They may send messages to us. So all of these things require this digital literacy that we didn't even need even 20 years ago we weren't using. As caregivers for aging parents or people who are working to maintain and obtain their own health, they need to have health literacy skills. How do I understand how much medicine I'm supposed to take and how often I'm supposed to take it based on this prescription? I just had a surgery to receive a new kidney or to receive a new liver. After this transplant, I'm dependent on the information that the hospital gives me to not reject that new organ so that I can stay alive and stay out of the hospital. So how do I manage that without health literacy? How do I know and how to navigate the MyChart? How do I know how to navigate, how to follow the directions that doctors are sending me to even care for my child or an aging parent without that? It's a lot to navigate. How do I figure out how to understand insurance and health insurance literacy? All of those things impact our learners in the same, all the things that we deal with and don't think about because our literacy skills allow us to kind of take that for granted can be a challenge for a lot of the students in our programs. Living in a democratic society, our students need civic literacy. How do you know how to register to vote? How do you know if you're still eligible to vote? In Ohio, there was an issue that was on our ballot in August that's called Issue 1. There's an issue on our ballot in November that's called Issue 1. And the way that they're positioned, people are very, very confused about, well, should I have voted yes or no on Issue 1 in August, or do I vote yes or no on Issue 1 in November? Is it the same Issue 1? And people are really, really confused. So having that civic literacy, knowing how to vote, where to register, knowing how to access a ballot, knowing that you can take a ballot in, being able to read the candidates' names, being able to read information and to be able to determine if an information source is reliable and valid or if it's probably some type of propaganda. All of those things are skills that our students need to be civically active. We're living in a melting pot, so having cultural literacy, having the ability to understand that not everyone is the same and that we have to be sensitive to one another's needs. All of those things require a literacy that our students depend on literacy skills for. If they're consumers of information, whether that's consuming information on their phones or through social media or through the newspaper, they need that media and information literacy to be able to determine what sources are reliable and what sources may be a little bit more biased. And then also just having content area literacy as adult learners to be able to pass the high school equivalency exams or to learn content related skills for their careers. So all of those things are very, very important, and our students require all of those different literacies. So on my screen now, the slide is entitled The Consequences of Illiteracy. And you can see a screenshot of a person's hands resting on the keyboard of a laptop. And so I want to kind of put the question back to you and to ask you to think about what are some of the consequences of illiteracy? And we won't do this one as a waterfall. You can just go ahead and type in your responses into the chat. But what are some of the challenges that you expect a child to experience if their parent has low literacy skills and lacks the skills to support their early literacy development? So I'm going to pause for a second and look at some of your responses. So how does a child, what is that experience like for a child whose parent doesn't have the literacy skills to help them with their homework or to even help them navigate their school, being able to turn in permission slips on time? How do you think that feels? What challenges do you expect a child to experience if their parent has low literacy skills? Exclusion, yes. Yes, challenges with academic achievement, being othered, absolutely. Lower vocabulary because their parents aren't reading to them, and maybe their parents are even have a much more constricted vocabulary. Laura, that's a great answer. Challenges to surviving, absolutely, Ms. Watson. Just living day to day. More missed days of school, absolutely. Okay, you guys are an amazing audience. Thank you so much for that. Getting a driver's license so they can, yeah, exactly. I have 2 learners now who are really focusing on trying to get that driver's license because they're totally dependent on family members right now. So yep, absolutely. So those are all great answers. So thinking about, so that's children. What kind of consequences do you expect when someone has no financial literacy skills? What are some of the risks that not having financial literacy skills might have on the learners that we serve? And while you all are putting your responses in the chat, I'll just share that I had a student who had been renting a television from Rent-A-Center. And so yes, and exploitation came up just as I said that, and so did victimization. She was renting a television from Rent-A-Center and she missed a payment. She'd been renting this TV for years, for like maybe 2 years. And she missed a payment and they came and they took the TV. And then she owed them money for the repossession. So we actually made that into a math problem to see, you know, how she could have bought that TV 3 times if she had the financial literacy skills to figure that out. So she was exploited and victimized and taken advantage of, and yes, had financial issues as a result of that. So thank you all for those responses. And then last, I'll ask, well, not last, I'm sorry. Next, I'll ask, what challenges will a person who lacks digital literacy skills face compared to their literate counterparts? What tasks do you do on a day-to-day basis that someone who's not literate will be unable to do? Things that we take for granted. What systems might be more difficult for them to navigate as a result of that? So struggling to improve credit is that's a great one too, because honestly, there's so many offers. I have so many people who come to me with questions about financial literacy decisions, and they just really are at a loss. So yes, so job applications with digital literacy, so many things are online, navigating insurance. A lot of our bills you can save money by getting your bills online. So there are lots of things that impact that. Searching the internet for information, not being unable to get loans, accessibility to opportunities. They'll be left behind in education training and for future jobs. Absolutely. And Nadia says, unable to differentiate between scam sites and legitimate sites. And absolutely, I think we see that more and more because information is so prevalent, permeates everywhere. Thank you again for those responses. So think about tasks related to being healthy. And so what about someone who lacks health literacy? How do you manage with lacking health literacy? And I'll talk about a couple of those examples in just a few moments. But what are some things that you think, some impacts of not having literacy skills on health? Okay, so Nadia says, I met a participant from a food bank whose identity was stolen twice because she didn't have digital literacy skills and her grandkids didn't want to teach her. That's a great example. And I think another side of that is adults who don't want to be dependent on their children to read their adult business for them, right? So Dan says quality of care and life, can't refill prescriptions, not seeking medical attention when it's needed, and not being able to read prescriptions and doctor's orders. Absolutely. So thank you again for those responses. And then last, I'll ask, so thinking about not having cultural literacy, not having media and information literacy, or not having content area literacy, all of those, you know, we're already listing so many examples. These are all ways that our students are impacted every single day of their lives because they're interacting with all of these systems every single day. So the title of the next slide, did I not click it? Okay, I'm trying not to push it. Okay, the title on the next slide is literacy is the heart of it all. And the image on this slide is a heart that's made out of some type of rope, and it's lying over a branch of a tree branch. So it's a beautiful bright red heart over a brown tree branch. It's really, really pretty. So the reason I use that image is because I feel like there are lots of different pieces to literacy, which is why I chose an image of a heart that is tied, kind of almost woven together. And I think that that's kind of a way for us to think about what we're providing for our students. So with all of the consequences that we just talked about from not having health literacy, digital literacy, civic literacy, all of those consequences, the good news is that our work, the functional literacy, is at the heart of all of it. Our work is what helps to create the capacity for students to develop multiple literacies. Our work acknowledges that students who are experiencing poverty, that students who are living in rural under-resourced areas, that students who lack proficiency in English language, that students who have learning differences and difficulties, students with disabilities, our work acknowledges that they all are impacted disproportionately by all of these different, by lacking literacy in all of these different areas. And our work has the potential to remove the barriers that lead to the disparate outcomes that our students face. So that really is a way of saying that our work is actually equity work. We are working to create the same options and opportunities for our students that we're able to enjoy ourselves. This slide is not advancing. Let me try that one more time. Okay, Long, do you mind advancing that slide? It didn't move for me. Thank you. Okay, so on the title of this slide is Equity and Literacy, and I use the quote by Dr. Nahid Dosani that says, equality is giving everyone a shoe, and equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits. And on my screen is a picture of a little kid with their feet in some adult sandals that clearly do not fit. And the reason I use this image is because we want to give students access to the roles that they need. So if our programs are providing kind of a one-size-fits-all curriculum for students that isn't really focused on their individual needs, we're doing that one-size-fits-all, and they're not necessarily getting what they need, which is what equity is. You might also hear people say that equity is giving every student the same options and opportunities, so that's equal, but equity is giving students what they need to all achieve the same outcomes. So achieving equity and literacy is providing students with access to the literacy skills that they need to navigate the different roles that they serve, which requires us to begin to incorporate multiple literacies in our instruction. Next slide, please. Here we go. So the title of this slide is Choosing Everything. And in that, the image on the screen is a person who's standing kind of at the crossroads of two paths and trying to decide if he should go to the left or if he should go to the right. And the reason I chose this image is because often in adult education, we have this tension between, the constraints of our program. I can either prepare students for the test, or I can focus on this, or I can prepare them for the test, or I can really focus on learning. I can get them graduated, or I can really focus on mastery. And I just want to say that, we look at that as we're preparing them for the test, but the thing is, there is a much bigger test after the high school equivalency test. And that test is called life. And life requires them to use the skills that they interact with. So one thing that we can do is really try to focus on using, I'm not sure if people are familiar with the term realia, but realia is the term for using authentic materials in the classroom. So if you're teaching an ESOL class, maybe you really want to bring in things that students need access to. So maybe you bring in a sample of the kinds of flyers that come home from the child's home, so the parent can understand what is meant by that flyer. Maybe you bring in circulars from the grocery store so that they know what to call the fruits and vegetables and meats and products that they need to purchase at the grocery store. You can bring in a menu from a restaurant so that they become more and more able to order off of that menu without having to rely on their children, or being able to talk about different, learning different things about their body so that they're not relying on their children to relay medical information to their medical providers. So we can teach adult literacy in the context of our learners' lives. And teaching in the context of their lives makes the lessons more relevant. It makes it relatable, it makes it applicable, and it makes makes life the practice field of literacy. So if I'm learning about a skill, let's say that I'm learning about using percentages in math, and we use the lesson in a financial literacy lesson where students learn about how percentages work, how interest works, then every day that they're in life, that they're looking at sales percentages, they're practicing the literacy that we want them to learn in the class. So I think sometimes we approach literacy thinking that, oh, well, I want to teach this lesson, I have to teach this lesson, and then here's this other skill, but we can actually use the context of life as the ground for that skill, as the context for those skills. And so for parents or parenting grandparents, we may bring in things that are related to parenting progress report, or learning how to use Infinite Campus, or learning how to use Google Classrooms. So we can kind of build that. We can build our math instruction around the ways that students navigate their financial world, or how they want to navigate that world. Like, so what math skills do students need to navigate their financial life? Some of my best lessons, place value, and people say ones, tens, and hundreds. I use pennies, dimes, and dollars because our students use those all the time, and they understand that they'd rather have a dime than 10 pennies. So they get that. Looking at the ways that students use their digital skills to navigate the world. So a lot of times we think of digital literacy as being something that's completely separate, and it can really be integrated in how we deliver instruction. We can contextualize instruction around health literacy, math, language, arts, science. Like, we can incorporate the content that we cover into every single area as consumers of information, as as people who are moving through a diverse world. All of those are opportunities to incorporate literacy into the context of things that our students experience every day. Okay, so a final thought on this piece. This slide is titled A Final Thought, and the text on the slide is consider instruction through the lens of your learners' experiences. And on the screen is just the picture of a city through one lens of a pair of eyeglasses. And I chose this image because I think that often as practitioners, because we have expertise and because we know some of the things that our students struggle with, and because we're reading research, we make a lot of assumptions about what our students need and what they want and how they want it. And our answers, our information isn't always the best way. So we have to really start thinking about what do our programs, how does our program present from the lens of our students, and what do they need? And I think the next examples that I'm going to talk about will kind of demonstrate that. Sometimes students have far more knowledge than we do. And so it's important to listen to them and to get their information. So I'm going to share an approach to health literacy in Ohio. So I work for a small adult literacy program in Cleveland. We provide free one-to-one instruction for adults. We did a survey of our learners to find out how many of them, what programmatic needs they thought we were lacking. And one of the things that the students brought up, and this was like 5 years ago, one of the things that they brought up was that they wanted information about health and different topics. A lot of students were diabetic. And so they really wanted to figure out, we really want to figure out what they wanted. And that is, this slide is entitled Start with Students, because that really should be where we begin our inquiry. When we start thinking about new program initiatives, we should start by asking our students, is this something that you need or want? Or what do you need or want that we're not providing? If it doesn't cause mission creep, then we can think about ways to expand to that. And the images of a gentleman sitting, and it looks like he's tutoring the young lady who's at the table. So if we start by talking to them and finding out what it is that they want, that can guide our work and help us to create programs that are a lot more successful and probably better attended and supported. So for example, we decided that we wanted to create this health literacy program. And as we were working to create the program, we were asking students what they needed, and they said they wanted lessons. And so what ended up happening, though, is that we started seeing needs in a different way. So the next slide says examples of need, and there's a picture of a spoonful of sugar with a raspberry on top, and strawberry on top, I'm sorry. And I use the slide because there was a student in our program who came to class. He was in his 60s, older gentleman, and he said, he came to class one day and he wasn't feeling well. And so my team member asked, what's going on? Why aren't you feeling well? And he says, well, I haven't eaten anything. And she says, well, why haven't you eaten anything? And he said, well, my doctor said I was diabetic and that what I can eat will kill me. And so I'm really afraid to eat. So he just didn't eat anything. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to advance that slide. So what we learned from that is that there were some very practical skills that he needed right away. And so we were able to connect him to a diabetes educator who was one of our volunteers, who was able to talk him through how to make healthy choices with the things that he has at home and with some of the favorite restaurants that he goes to. In another instance, we had a student who came in with orders from a doctor, lab work from a doctor, and I guess he'd had kind of a hurried appointment. He didn't really get time to consult with the doctor who saw him. And he came to us and he asked, what does this say? Do I have prostate cancer or not? And fortunately, we had a relationship with a university partner where a physician's assistant teaches a class and a program at a local college. And he was able to sit down with the student over Zoom and go over what those results meant so that he would have some immediate peace. So we started seeing these different needs come out in our students, and we'd heard their requests for information. So my first thought was, how, I don't know anything about, like, I don't have a medical background to provide this information. What are we going to do? And just so happened that the local medical college was looking to find sites where their students could be involved in community projects, because they wanted them to get to know people in the community. They wanted to get to know the people who would be their future patients. They wanted them to develop the disposition to work with those learners, with those potential patients. So we had a group of 12 students, and we said, our students would like to create health literacy lessons. These are the 12 topics that they're interested in. Can you create lessons that are kind of built around them? And can you level them so that they're written at a high school level text complexity, middle school level complexity, and maybe an elementary school complexity? And so they worked on those lessons. They worked on them for an entire year. We took those lessons to a board member who had a medical background. She made some edits. The second year, we made those edits, and then we took them to the students and got some feedback and did a couple focus groups with the students. And one of the things that the students said was that, this is great that you're kind of giving us this information, but it's still a little bit inaccessible. So then the students went back. They made pronunciation keys for all of the medical terminology. They made the lessons so that they articulated with some of our science lessons as well. And they also added some activities, some application activities at the end, so that the students could work with the tutor and then try some of the things. So if they're doing a lesson on blood pressure, they can see what their pulse is when they're resting and what their pulse is after exercise, things that were more applicable. And so we worked with those students for a couple. So we had this medical school partnership that allowed us to provide that information. Then we had the opportunity to work with, to form another partnership with one of the local colleges and universities, Baldwin Wallace University. And with that university partnership, we were able to, we asked students if they felt like their literacy impacted their ability to access health literacy information. And the students did surveys, and our students were like, no, my literacy levels don't impact my ability to understand health information. The students were like, there's no way, there's no impact. So they developed a tool that we're actually going to pilot this semester to see how can we tell if the students' literacy level, so if students reading at a third grade level, are there certain health literacy skills that they can't do? And then is a student who's reading at a sixth grade level, what other skills are they able to access that they couldn't access that the student who's reading at a third grade level can access? We don't know the answers to that yet. It's something that we're interested in finding. So this next slide says our prescription for health literacy, and on the screen is a prescription bottle that's spilled over, and of course they're little the little Valentine hearts rather than pills. And I use this image because our health literacy program was kind of a labor of love. We really just wanted to make sure that we were giving our students what they needed and what they wanted. And what ended up happening is we formed a health empowerment group out of that. And so our students talked to the medical school students. They were talking about some of the experiences that they have as not being seen, not being heard in doctors' offices. And so we totally flipped the program from just focusing on being able to read information about health and making applications to that and having questions to ask the doctor, to really understanding what their rights are as consumers of medical services. And so all of that is really still dependent on their regular functional literacy skills. And so this is just kind of a way for them to see that the literacy skills have a reason as far as their health is concerned, and that those the functional literacy skills are useful in accessing health information, which allows them to have better health outcomes in the long run. Okay, so now we're going to go to Becki in South Dakota, and she's going to talk to us about evidence-based reading instruction.
Thank you. That was great, Carmen. Thank you. So I want to visit with you a little bit about evidence-based reading instruction through the lens of South Dakota's experience. And South Dakota has been fortunate in that we don't see a large number of basic literacy students. In fact, last year, only 2% of South Dakota's students had an entry level of ABE level 1. However, like much of the country, we have large numbers of intermediate level readers. And as you probably know, this group has been traditionally difficult to move forward through those NRS levels. So for this reason, many years ago, South Dakota was thrilled to be included in the original Student Achievement in Reading, or STAR, project pilot. And as an original STAR state, South Dakota has offered regular STAR cohorts to the field since 2006. We felt that the best way that we could support students' literacy was to have really well-trained teachers in teaching evidence-based reading instruction. And because technical assistance is such an integral part of all professional development, we've provided additional support in the form of follow-up trainings and technical assistance on an ongoing basis. South Dakota is a large state geographically with a small population, which can present a lot of logistical and cost-related challenges for all professional development. And one of the ways that we as a state professional development team support our programs and teachers is through funding of professional development. All of the trainings that we provide are provided through the state's professional development budget, so there's no cost to programs or participants. All expenses, including per diem if necessary, are covered by our professional development budget. And those trainings can take many different forms. They can be standalone webinars, sessions at our annual state conference, part of our monthly professional development webinar series, or large federal-based initiatives. One of the things that we've been very careful of is to make sure that any of our professional development, but especially those refresher sessions and introductory sessions covering specific reading instruction needs, are based on both state data and feedback from the field. And one example of this is we've started seeing some of our teachers who had been through the STAR training, who were still having difficulty translating what they had learned into good lesson plans that they were using in the classroom. They knew what the information that they had gained from the training told them. They knew what they wanted to do. They were having problems just getting over that last hurdle and turning the information that they learned into really good, solid evidence-based lesson plans. And this led to the creation of lesson planning tools to aid those teachers in getting started building evidence-based lesson plans for all the components of reading so that they could really capitalize on the training that we'd given them. Now, as many of you may know, STAR training is lengthy. It usually runs over a period of 7 to 8 months, and that can be a heavy lift for some programs and teachers to participate in. So over the years, we found that we wanted to come up with some incentives to participation to encourage people to continue to buy into this training so that we could produce those teachers who were really solid in the skills they needed to support our emergent readers. And as with all initiatives, and as Carmen so beautifully said, partnerships are key to success. South Dakota has benefited from an amazing partnership in support of our evidence-based reading trainings. The South Dakota Statewide Family Engagement Center has partnered with us since 2018. They reached out to us initially because they had a special funding source to support family literacy, and they recognized that family literacy starts with adult literacy. As Carmen said in her presentation, those parents and grandparents need to have those literacy skills to pass on to their children. So as part of this project, the Statewide Family Engagement Center funded 2 family literacy events at each of our participating adult education program locations per year, with a budget of $300 per event, which was great. It offered us the ability to do something really creative with family literacy and to hold special events for our students and their children, to draw other people in from the community into our sites to participate in these events. And I have to say, during the pandemic, those projects were a lifeline for a lot of our programs and a lot of our families. We were doing them online and we had such huge participation. But they went one step further. They wanted to help support STAR literacy training by providing incentives to bolster our actual training offerings. So they came to us and they asked, what can we do to enhance these existing trainings? And it gave us a really great opportunity to fund some of the activities that are included in the training, but can be really difficult for programs if they don't have additional funding to support those activities. You'll see some examples on the slide. They offered a program participant stipend. So upon completion of the training, programs could request stipends of up to $500 per qualifying participant to offset the cost of additional lesson planning hours during training, additional instructor hours to complete diagnostic assessments, finding a classroom aide to facilitate instructional groupings, or additional instructor hours to develop and host after-hour family literacy activities to go along with their adult literacy activities. They offered a travel reimbursement of up to $300 per program. This was for travel for instructors to observe other classrooms in neighboring programs, or for administrators to conduct classroom observations at satellite sites. That might seem like a small consideration, but my own program in South Dakota consists of physical sites in 5 communities and covers a service area of over 22,000 square miles in eastern South Dakota. So visiting each of our locations can get expensive. So funds could also be used for additional on-site technical assistance from the STAR trainer. So instead of traveling to neighboring programs or traveling within their site, they could request additional on-site training time or classroom observations from the STAR trainer. And then the last piece was classroom materials. Programs could request up to $250 per program location to cover the purchase of classroom materials to assist in delivering evidence-based reading instruction. And this was a benefit that I think went right to the heart of serving our students. So many times when you go through a training, you get these great ideas and you find wonderful resources, and there's just no budget to go out and purchase them. So what the Statewide Family Engagement Center funding did was it gave each of those STAR training completers the ability to say, I've got money, so I can go out and I can look, I can purchase that Cadillac vocabulary series that I really, really want to have. And I don't have to take any money away from any other area in my own program budget. So that partnership with the Statewide Family Engagement Center greatly enhanced our ability to provide very comprehensive support to programs who are implementing evidence-based reading instruction in our state. And by enhancing the training our teachers were receiving, we are in turn enhancing the quality of literacy instruction that our students are receiving. Another incentive that we've offered with all of our trainings are credits and credentials. And this is nothing new, right? CEUs and graduate credits are offered for all trainings. Many of our teachers in South Dakota are credentialed through the K-12 system, so those credits help them with recertification. However, there's no South Dakota Department of Education teaching credential specifically for adult education in our state. So to fill that gap, the professional development team in South Dakota provides state-level credentials to emphasize how important training is and to demonstrate the professionalism of the field. This credentialing provides a way for programs and individuals to demonstrate their proficiency in select areas of adult education. There's a reading specialty credential that's tied specifically to our STAR training cycles. This requires the support of a program administrator. The individual must complete all facets of the training with the approval of the training facilitator in order to qualify for a credential. And once the training's complete, the individual fills out a simple online application. Once the trainer approves the application, the state office issues the credential to that teacher. This credentialing program started in 2019, and since that time, 79 credentials have been awarded, which might not seem like a big number. But again, remember, I said population-wise, we're pretty small. In the state of South Dakota, we have 7 Title II funded programs and approximately 80 teachers in the field at any given time. So that number of 79 credentials in the last few years is pretty impressive for a new feature that we're offering. All of our efforts are really focused on underscoring the importance of solid evidence-based instruction and reading. And we want to make the training experience for our teachers as rewarding and as pain-free as possible so that programs and individuals are really excited to take part in those trainings. Our emphasis is on providing training and resources that are practical and applicable in the classroom and that support instructors in reaching their professional goals, because we believe that's one of the best ways to increase student skills and student performance. I am happy now to pass over to Cameron Christie from the National STAR Project to tell you a little bit more about some exciting news with STAR.
Thanks, Becki. And thank you so much for sharing such an in-depth and helpful overview of why the STAR training is useful, what it has done for South Dakota. It has been an absolute joy working with you for the last couple of years since I've been a part of the STAR project. So I'm here to talk about a couple of the updates to the STAR project. So for those of you who are in states that are currently participating in STAR, you should have probably heard from me about some of these updates. If you're interested in STAR, then we'll take a few minutes and kind of let you know what's new with STAR and what next steps are if you would think that it could be helpful for your state and your program. So first, the STAR training has been moved under the Links umbrella, so it is now a Links course. That means that if your program or you as an individual have been able to work in other Links courses, you now do not have to go anywhere new to access the STAR training when you begin. And you can also easily access the resources in the same area that you can get the Links general resources. So that is the first thing. If you or someone you know has completed the STAR training in the past, we will be reaching out to you later this fall to make sure that you continue to get access, to maintain access to those resources that were available to you in our old platform under our new platform in Links. So if you are concerned, feel free to reach out to us. We can let you know kind of what our timeline is. We can make sure that you are included in that outreach to get you in our new system. And related to that, our first state cohorts have begun their training in the new STAR course in the Links Learning Portal. That's been a really exciting development, and it's been a learning experience for all of us. And finally, you know, if this is something that sounds like it could be helpful for your state, then I am more than happy to talk to you all. We are kicking off a multi-state cohort recruitment now. That multi-state recruitment should be starting in January 2024. And to answer your question, this is a training. There is no cost to participants. There is a need for state engagement and buy-in and investment. So that is where we really want to make sure that the state level really kind of plans that into their professional development. And we really want to work with the state to make sure that everyone, the participants, the local programs, and the state level really understand the time investment and resources that are a part of this training. As Becki mentioned, it's an intensive, rather long training, but in part because this has been shown to be very effective. I will drop the email address to contact me and the program in the chat. And if you have any questions about what kind of investment, time-wise or resources-wise this would take, if you think that this would be an interest to your state, or if you have questions as a previous STAR completer, then feel free to reach out. We can help you with all of your questions. And with that, I will pass it on to Eric.
Thank you, Cameron. Long do I have access? Oh, there, thank you. I can move my slides now. I'm Eric Enesheim of Literacy Minnesota. I'm here to talk about digital literacy and digital equity. I wanted to, Carmen's introduction to multiple literacies was amazing because it really tied together all the different things that we're talking about, but also what I've been thinking about. Just a little background on who I am in my agency. Literacy Minnesota is a professional development provider for the state of Minnesota, particularly around technology and volunteerism. And we also run the statewide data system for Minnesota. I am the longtime executive director, and I stepped back from that role about 1.5 years ago to focus entirely on digital literacy and digital equity. And for many reasons. One of them, it's a huge passion of mine, but another reason is because we had been working on a platform called North Star Digital Literacy for many years. And, you know, it was important before the pandemic. And just to give you a little sort of perspective, before the pandemic, we were working with about 400 different programs around the country who were using North Star. Today, we're working with about 3,200 programs around the country that are using North Star. That happened in about 3.5, 4 years. So clearly, there is a huge need for assessing and sort of skills training around digital literacy. So I'm excited that we're having this conversation. I'm excited that Octave is interested in having a conversation around digital literacy, and it's exciting to hear that all the different pathways that are happening around this. So I am going to break the cardinal rule, and I'm going to read these aloud, because I know some people, when they look at this, maybe won't get to see the slides. So our definitions that we use for digital literacy and digital equity: the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, understand, evaluate, and communicate information, requiring both cognitive and technical skills, very academic. The digital equity definition: the condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in society, democracy, and economy, possess a variety of technical cognitive skills. Now, as you, obviously, these are definitions that are constantly in flux and changing as everything changes. We didn't even really, I can't speak for everybody, but I know that we didn't really include the digital skills piece in our definitions of literacy until a while back. So when I started in this field, there was no discussion about digital literacy being part of literacy even. And the conversation around digital equity and the digital divide was non-existent even, just a few years back. Those of us who work in the field using technology and around technology have known that this is a huge concern and a huge challenge. The digital divide was not new to many of us, but I think there are a lot of people who this is sort of a new thing to. And the one of the silver linings, I think, around the pandemic is that it brought these issues to light. And if you think about, like Carmen was saying, the digital divide and digital equity really brings to light things like economics and how people interact with their community and their society, and how people participate in democracy, are all part of digital equity. And digital equity, means that there has to be some skills involved in that as well. What you can do and what you can't do, basically, right? There we go. So when we talk about a digitally literate individual, this sort of comes down to on the ground in our programs. It means basically possessing certain skills that we're, I think, more and more aware of, using diverse technologies. This is all about that resiliency piece as well. So, for example, during the pandemic, a lot of people had to figure out how to use online platforms like Zoom, right? And so once you learn Zoom, do you know then how to use Teams and Google Meets and all the other different platforms that are out there? Or do you just know how to use Zoom? So resiliency around using new technologies and technologies as they're changing and adapting. Using skills and technology to collaborate and communicate. Again, we've learned through the pandemic that, one of the important things was keeping people together even though they weren't together. So communicating through different means, using different types of technology. And, civic engagement, societal contribution. These are all back to sort of that conversation around the ties between family, between health, between school and work, and all these different things that you wouldn't necessarily have thought require the use of technology, but now do. Years ago, technology wasn't really part of school. It wasn't really necessarily part of healthcare. But now healthcare requires you to go into portals and muck around in your information, right? It requires you to oftentimes do online visits, and those aren't easy to do, and they require certain skills, and they require certain kinds of resiliency, because you maybe learn one system and now you have to do another system. So these are all part of what we call digital literacy and digital equity. Just some quick, I think, pretty eye-opening statistics, and I have to say that these are, I believe, pre-pandemic, probably old. I don't know if that necessarily means they're wrong. Maybe we're doing better, but I also wonder if things are moving along so fast that it's really hard to keep up. So you can see from this, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, through that PAC study, half of Americans aren't comfortable using technology to learn. That's a lot of people. 72% lack sufficient digital problem-solving skills. And that isn't just old folks, that's millennials too. Sometimes people think, oh, they're digital natives. The reality is that people sure are using phones. That doesn't mean that everyone's using the different other technologies that are needed to work, to go into the workplace, or to go into the your healthcare portals, etc. 1/3 of U.S. workers and half of Black and Latino workers have limited or no digital skills. And these are startling statistics. And I think they're even more startling when you look at that next statistic, which is recent. The National Skills Coalition did a study very recently that found that 92% of job ads that they researched required some level of digital skills. So that matches up not at all with what we're seeing in terms of statistics, and I'm sure what you're seeing in terms of the learners that you're working with. So what are some of the solutions to that? I'm going to talk about a project that we worked on in just a minute here, but I think it's really important to note that particularly around this issue, I mean, I think for literacy in general, partnerships are extremely important. Working with, the groups around us, for lots of reasons, are extremely important. For digital literacy, I see it as being imperative. I don't see any options of not working with different partners around us. And the kinds of partners that I think are extremely important, and this is a very limited list, and I think there's lots of others. Libraries have been early adopters and incredible partners on a lot of these digital literacy projects and other projects, but particularly around digital literacy. Workforce systems need to be, I'm not sure they always are, but they need to be part of this. When you see that statistic about 92% of jobs require digital skills, well, I think we're looking to our workforce systems to help us out with that, along with community colleges, I think. Other governmental organizations, other nonprofits, public housing and healthcare systems all should be part of these conversations. And it shouldn't surprise you that the list that I have here is similar to the list that you've probably seen around the Digital Equity Act and who the partners around the funding should be for the Digital Equity Act, because they are the same partners, and that's no accident that they're listed as potential partners. And in fact, I think with a lot of the funding around the Digital Equity Act, there's going to be requirements that there's partners involved in these programs. All right, so having said all that, I want to talk a little bit about a program that we worked on at the beginning of the pandemic. And I should start by saying that, my organization is kind of known as a digital literacy organization. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, when some of these issues became more clear, we were approached by a number of different organizations to be partners on different things. Early on in the pandemic, there was quite a bit of money flowing around, CARES Act, a few other pots of funding that were flowing around. And they were going to counties, they were going to states. And these groups were all looking to do projects, to get, I guess at that point, people were saying to get technology into people's houses, into people's homes. At the very beginning, we were having this conversation about, getting computers to people, making sure they have internet, very important, extremely important. But there's a third leg to that stool, which is the skills and the skills building and the knowledge that needs to happen around this as well. And we've been, beating that dead horse ever since. And I personally believe that I'd stick with the three-legged stool analogy, because I think it makes sense that if one of those legs isn't there, the stool doesn't stand up. So computers, getting computers into people's homes, technology, making sure that there's broadband, which is a lot of what the Digital Equity Act is doing, is extremely important. But the skills building, I think, is oftentimes the forgotten stepchild of this. And that's basically our wheelhouse. That should be adult basic education's wheelhouse. right? And so we were approached by a bunch of different groups, and we worked with a bunch of them on making sure that we did what we could to get skills out to people, but mostly those projects were about getting computers to people. So this project came along from Ramsey County, which is a leader in digital equity. I've always found, and this looked more intriguing than some of the others. And this was fairly early on in the pandemic, built around CARES Act funding. And the idea was to get computers, internet, digital literacy training into the homes of residents who had been affected by COVID-19, whether it be the jobs, economy, or other, right? So the idea was to make sure that everyone who wanted to could have a laptop, a hotspot for access, and the skills that they needed in order to use them, in order to sign up for internet, in order to use their computer, in order to search for jobs, that sort of thing. So the partners and I kind of consider this to be a dream team. We were super lucky to be part of this project. The libraries were involved, as they should be. They offered space, they offered moral support. They were always there. During that period, it was kind of hard to find spaces. Everyone had masks on. It was hard to find spaces to do things, and they offered a lot of space and drop off and pick up and et cetera, which was really nice. We worked with a group called Tech Dump, which maybe some of you have heard, PCs for People. These are groups that refurbish computers, and they're nonprofits typically. They refurbish computers and get them out to the community. At this point in the pandemic, it was very difficult to get new equipment. And so we were going with refurbished equipment at that point. But they were good quality, not super old computers that we were getting out to people. Our organization, Literacy Minnesota's job was to provide the North Star subscriptions and provide intense digital navigation to the people that were participating in this. Now, once they opened this up, it was overrun with people who wanted to participate. So they had to basically do a raffle, a lottery. And so we ended up with about 500 people that were part of this particular piece of the project. Every single one of those people needed to have access to a digital navigator, whether they needed the help or not. They needed a digital navigator to unlock their computer. And so what we did is we were able to hire 5 digital navigators from the communities that were most affected in Ramsey County, which is the St. Paul area. So we were very lucky to have the funding to do that and hire them, go through the process of training them on digital navigation, techniques around digital navigation. And as most of you probably know, digital navigation is much more than the technology pieces. There's a lot of emotional pieces. There's a lot of soft skill pieces that go along with digital navigation as well. So our role was to play that role, to do a lot of the programmatic pieces. Ramsey County, essentially through their workforce system, provided the CARES Act funding and bought all the computers and bought all the access, et cetera. So what we noted, again, it was an amazing project to be part of. Many of the people really just needed a computer and access, right? Not all of them needed the skills, as I'm sure we were noting with a lot of learners that we work with. Many of them did, though. Many of them, and so the initial unlocking of the computer required a digital navigator, and we could easily find out then because they were required to take North Star assessments. We were easily able to figure out who needed additional work and who didn't. And what we found was that people were very happy and willing to accept that help. I was in the office at that time, so I ran into lots of our digital navigators as they're going in and out and meeting with people. And it was interesting because they would say that one person would require 20 minutes and then another person would require 20 hours, right? So they would end up spending lots and lots of time with the people who needed that additional help. And then some people just unlock the computer and everyone's happy, right? So it was very interesting to see sort of the diversity and what was happening there. We were lucky enough to have time and money to do an evaluation after the project. And Long is putting into the chat the impact report from that. And I suggest you take a look at it because it's actually very impressive. As you can see here, for every dollar spent, there's a projected $2.4 in social value generated. And you can see what that means exactly. But a lot of it has to do with improved earnings. And that was, a validated study that showed that. So you can really tell that a difference was made in people's lives through this. And you could also tell when you talk to somebody who had gone through that program, who got in their computer and gotten the skills, it opened up a new world to them. It allowed people to get better jobs as they moved through that process. And one of the things that we noted was that more than half of the people that were part of this program were interested and wanted to know more about adult basic education programming and more digital skills programming. So a lot of the people were, wanted to continue on and learn more and do more. So it was, I think a great step towards digital equity, and it was really a fun project to be part of. And that's all I have. I don't know if we have time to, if anyone wants to offer in the chat any ideas or thoughts that they've had from their experiences with digital equity. I don't know if we have time for that. Long or
Thanks, Eric. Why don't we have people put their questions that they might have in the chat, and we'll come back to those at the end. And in the meantime, we can turn it over to Carol.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. And thank you, my friends and colleagues, for talking about family literacy or families involved in adult education in all of the presentations. I think it's really great to hear what you're doing in your states. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about family literacy in Pennsylvania. And first, I always like to kind of define, what family literacy is, because it has a lot of different approaches and frameworks. But the family literacy model that we use in Pennsylvania and at the Goodling Institute for Research and Family Literacy, where I work at Penn State, it's often designed to integrate these 4 key components. It has an adult education or English language learning component for the adult learners so that parents and caregivers can build their skills. It has an early childhood or school age education component so that children are going to in school and learning at the same time. It has an interactive parent-child literacy activity component. It's known as either ILA, interactive literacy activities, or PACT, parent and child together time. And then it also has a parent education component where parents learn about the educational development of their children. And so family literacy in Pennsylvania has been around for about 25 years as a specifically funded program. It's funded through the Pennsylvania Department of Education, the Division of Adult Education. We actually have state funds that are required to be used for family literacy. It's through Act 143, the legislative mandate that requires at least 25% of the funds are used for family literacy. And some of you may or may not know that Cheryl Keenan is the person who really helped to get those funds for family literacy in Pennsylvania. She used to be a state director here, and she did that 25 years ago. This year, 14 programs are funded for a total of, close to $3 million. And they all use this 4-component model that I talked about: the adult education, parent education, ILA or PACT, and ECE. We at the Goodling Institute for Family Literacy Research, we also have some of the state money to run family literacy programs. So we run them in the county, Center County and Lycoming County. And I also was, really enjoyed hearing what you had to say, Becki, about the pandemic. We really feel that if families would not have had the family literacy program during the pandemic, they would have been lost. It was actually a lifeline. We served many immigrant families, and they were having just a whole lot of trouble and difficulty learning how to navigate, all the information and understand the information about school closing. It was really, really difficult for them to, be active participants in their child's education because they didn't know what was going on. But the family literacy program really, really helped them navigate this. We also learned more about in our other adult education programs how important it was for family literacy, because the children were in the background, even if they weren't in a family literacy program. So some of our regular adult education programs did more with the parenting component. And I think as a result of this, we do a lot of research at the Goodling Institute about what's going on with family literacy in other states. And we've really seen an uptick in states doing more with family literacy, which we think is really helpful. Also in our local program, the other thing that another thing that we did was we had trouble kind of at first figuring out how to do the interactive literacy activities. And sometimes parents couldn't always do them at home. We did figure out ways to do them, but as they got more and more stressed with the pandemic, they were not participating as much in the interactive literacy activities. So one of our teachers decided to do a nighttime story reading and actually did the interactive literacy activity at night. So she and the parents read to the children before they went to bed, and that was a really, really popular event during the pandemic. So next slide. So we also have at the Goodling Institute for Research in Family Literacy, we've been doing this for 4 years now. The William Penn Foundation in Philadelphia has funded, it's increased now to 6-year initiative. They've given us more money to keep on going. We're going to we think pretty sure work until 2026. We use a 3 or 4 component model. It's only one program does the 3 component model. It's a program that serves grandparents. They don't really need the adult education component, but they work that into the parent education. So they do digital literacy and the parent education, but they do these other 4 components. Goodling is the external evaluator and technical assistance provider. So we do a lot of professional development. We have cross-site trainings. We do in face-to-face, and then we do monthly coaching with our sites. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the really great sites that we have. It's Beyond Literacy. They are doing both in-person and remote classes for their components. They partner with the Philadelphia Public Schools, and most of the people that they serve are English language learners. They have a really wonderful, really coordinated partnership with Moffett Elementary. And the coordinator of ESL is working hand in hand with the instructor to serve the families that are coming to this program. They give us space at the school. And so it's been a really wonderful program for both the families to get more engaged with the school, to learn about what's going on with the school. And it's been wonderful for the school too, because they can work really closely with immigrant families who aren't really understanding some of the things that are going on. We also have Indo-American Chinese Council. They do both a high flex and a remote program. High flex, I don't know if everyone knows that term. It means that some students are in person, some students are online, and so you do both at the same time. They partner with Ken Crest Early Learning Centers for the early childhood component. They have just a really wonderful way of retaining the students in their programs. And I think it's partially because it's a place-based project. They're at the the early learning center so the parents can go pick up their children, bring them in the ILAs, and it works out really well. Kencrest Early Learning Centers also does a program. They partner with IAC to do the adult education piece. They have the same high flex and remote approach. They serve both ESL and students looking to gain their high school equivalency. They also use the Raising the Reading program for the ILA part of the program, which has been really successful. The Nationality Service Centers they've started this just this semester in person. So they're doing both remote and in person, but just in September they started that. They use mostly volunteers to do their programming, and they have a very strong case management approach because they're working with refugees. So it's a very important program to help the refugees learn about the school system and what's happening with their children, and to understand the culture that they've come to and the school culture. And then finally, we have the Supportive Older Women's Network, or SOWN, who is serving custodial grandparents and grandparents. This is a really important program for the grandparents. They do both in-person and remote classes, and they partner with senior centers in the city throughout, I think, 3 or 4 of them. I want to share some of our findings, our significant findings. And again, significant findings quantitatively, they mean that these aren't happening by chance. We've been collecting data for 4 years. We have a pre-post survey that relates to the interactions between parents and their children. And these are some of the highlights of what has changed and increased. So caregivers are increasing their own reading practices. They're increasing the support of their children's development and their education. They're increasing their interactions with their children, which is really important for helping them learn how to develop and build their own literacy skills, which some of, I think Carmen had mentioned how important that was. They're increasing their interactions with schools and teachers. They're checking on homework more frequently. And then they're going out and visiting the library, museums, or zoos, or historical sites more frequently. And we keep doing analysis to keep up with it. I just heard digital literacy is changing significantly as well. I didn't get a chance to put that on these slides. And so we also collect qualitative data on child development and caregiver child interactions. We do this through interviews, through observations and focus groups. We've done 3 rounds of those over the 4 years, and we've learned that caregivers feel like they're understanding child development better. They're letting their children lead activities. This is really important because when parents do things, they often will do the things for their children and not let their children do them. It helps the children learn a little bit better, and it helps the parents see where the children are with their learning. They're more engaged with their children, especially with literacy activities and family time. And the children saw their caregivers learning online, which emphasized the importance of learning. And this happened a lot during the pandemic. And the caregivers would, it actually helped build their confidence, because the children were saying, my mom and dad or my mom is going to, and we have mostly females, so my mom is going to school. And it just built this, different environment about how especially immigrant parents felt that they were learning, and the children felt so happy that their parents were going to school too. More qualitative findings on literacy and language development. We found that these activities benefited both the caregivers and the children. They expanded language. They had more discussions about things like bullying, discussions about what's happening at school, that sort of thing. Caregivers have also increased their courage, comfort, and confidence when going to medical appointments, talking to the children's teachers, completing errands. And then caregivers notice the expansion of vocabulary and grammar when speaking with their children, which help them assist with their children's homework. Something I think that, back here, that Carmen was talking about how important that was in her discussion. And we are going to be publishing these findings. We have a whole lot more. They're very robust and very important. And I just hope that more states begin advocating for family literacy, because it is really an important program. And the fact that Even Start isn't funded anymore, it doesn't really matter. We need to keep doing it. Rebecca, had a question. I don't know if I should answer it now.
Yeah, that's fine. We're moving to our Q&A, so please feel free.
Okay. We are making presentations on the findings at COABE, at the National Center for Families Learning. And I'm happy to send you our slides when we send them if you shoot me an email. Thank you.
Wonderful. So because I can't talk and type at the same time, Carol, I'll just tell you how much I appreciated your presentation and all the fantastic things that you've found as a result of family literacy and the impact. I think that really got back to some of Carmen's questions at the beginning about the impact that literacy has, or parents' literacy has on their children. That was just so poignant. So thanks for wrapping us up in that way. I want to pause for a moment to see if anyone has any questions for our presenters. I know that they shared a lot. There's a lot there to really chew on and think about as we consider the importance of literacy at the heart of adult education. Carol, Rebecca requested your email address, so if you don't mind sharing that with her, either privately or in the chat, that would be appreciated. All right, so as you consider any final questions, any discussion points that you have that you'd like to bring up, I wanted to mention that our next month's webinar, will be on promising practices in co-enrollment. It will be just as exciting and just as interesting and just as important as today's topic. That will take place on November 1st. Long has already put the link to register for that in the chat. We hope that you'll join us. It'll be from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern. And for those of you on the West Coast, that is noon to 12:30 p.m. Pacific. Again, please register now. And we want to make sure that we are always meeting your needs. So if you have any questions that you want us to make sure to share with our presenters for the November 1st webinar, please put those in the chat as well, so that we can make sure that they get addressed during our webinar. So you have two types of questions that you can be putting into the chat right now, both about anything that you heard today and anything related to promising practices and co-enrollment. And while you do that, I wanted to put in a final plug. If you're interested in joining the upcoming STAR training, please don't forget that we are currently recruiting for our 2024 multi-state cohort. We hope you'll join us if your state is ready, or if you have any questions about joining the STAR community, Long put the email address that you can use to ask those questions in the chat.
Marcella, I put my email in there too, because other people were asking me for it, so it's in there.
Thanks so much, Carol. All right, if there are no other questions, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you so much to our incredible presenters. I know that I learned so much, and it was just really a wonderful day to a wonderful way to spend my Wednesday, thinking about this really important topic. I appreciate all of you so much. And we hope that you will all join us for next month's webinar.